think
Or
you
existing.
gotta look at the camera, not the.
Woo!
Huh?
Let me check our audios. Looks pretty good. Cool. Alright, so we're basically recapping episode 6 because number 1, we're bad and didn't have the microphone working, so here is the redo. And number 2, we've got some of our crap figured out, and number 3, life is more manageable. Sorry we've been dark for, I don't know, a couple weeks now. So getting back on the train, doing all the stuff and things. Let's get this there. Okay. So, decisions. Game plan. Let's go to our good fandy dandy, super high quality, not been able to type. We have a number of months before all this happens. And one of the things that I want to make sure we get figured out and just kind of starting at the higher level of things I think is better for programmers. Obviously this is going to be a crash course for you and you're probably not going to quite understand everything that's happening.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll try to do our best, but YOLO. So we have, just to kind of, if anybody's new, we'll kind of explain the plan is, we're going to have a app, and this app is going to tell the bartender what to do, and then this is going to be the Raspberry Pi, and then it's going to have a set of like servos and motors and everything. We'll just call them accessories. And it's going to control all that. But it's not actually going to know any of the recipes for the drinks. Like, it's the only thing the bar is going to do is say, I have this much of these things, and you can figure out what you want me to make from that. You just have to tell me, add this much this much that, whatever. You tell me what to do. So, the app is going to tell what to do, but because I'm not a fan of going through and trying to set an entire list of cocktails, we're going to use something, as we mentioned before, called the Cocktail DB. So that's going to be, it's just kind of a API that's out in the world, and the app is actually going to go request, say, hey, I've got these things from the bar, tell me what you want me to do, and then the app can say, okay, here's the list of cocktails that use, whiskey,
that you're capable of making with that.
Or not even just necessarily capable of making, but if somebody wants a specific thing, that's something that DB will handle. So you could say, I want, a person can walk up to the app and say, you can have our 2 cocktails that we have hard-coded in there, but they could also say, I'm feeling a vodka drink, hit vodka drinks, and it'll pull up and say, oh, here's all the vodka drinks that you can make right now. You know what I'm saying? So, that's kind of the idea. So, this app is going to be built with Ionic, which is basically a app version of Electron, which is also words you probably don't understand because you're not a programmer. But basically what happens is these Electron and Ionic, what they do under the hood is take web code and package it up. Electron packages it up for a desktop, and Ionic packages up for a app.
Okay.
So they're not performant. They're way, not super efficient when it comes to hardly anything in the app world because you're a lot better going native. But for our means, there's going to be very little, computational power there. Most of the actual work that's going to happen in the app is going to be making calls to the API to say, here's, the things that are happening, and then managing what kind of state the bar is in to say, okay, I need to take the bar levels of the different things, combine it with the database stuff, and present a nice UI to the user. So realistically, not all that difficult.
So when you say native, that's just another thing like Ionic or Electronics.
Native being like somebody goes and writes an iOS app using Swift or Objective-C, and somebody going and writing an Android app using the I'm trying to remember. I know Java, but there's also I'm trying to remember the other thing.
Using the language that phone or that
right.
whatever favors.
Right.
Okay.
Is built around.
Okay.
That's what native is. But obviously, when you go native, it means you're writing two separate apps, one for Android, one for iOS. Whereas something like a web view, you're saying put it in a browser. You figure out what your browser is.
This will make it somewhat universal.
Right.
Okay.
So, and then you're right. It's not going to be perfect for the most part. If you're just worried about UI type things, should be fairly straightforward.
Okay.
So, Ionic is built on Angular. So, I think we'll just do a couple episodes, maybe this week. I don't know. We'll see how I feel.
So enthused.
Just kind of talking about how the front end framework of Angular works.
Okay.
So, we talked about how HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like that is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Angular says, okay, I'm going to manage all that for you, but you have to play by the rules that I've, been built around. And you say, cool, I'll play by those. And then what you do is you take 80% of those rules, or say 90% of those rules that you learn from Angular,
Mm-hmm.
and those apply to Ionic.
Okay.
So, my thoughts were, for this episode, we're going to go grab Angular, install it, because that's the way you do it, and get like a Hello World app running.
Okay.
So, let's go down that path. And then once we get Angular kind of, like at least conceptually, like at a high level, I think it'd be a good time to move to actual Ionic. And at that point in time, we need to make sure we have like devices all figured out, and because fundamentally the whole point is to deploy it to like a tablet, which we should see. Maybe that's next a future episode. If that Fire tablet would be something that we could do this on. I don't know if it will, but we'll have to play.
Cool.
Have a good time. So, we'll bring a tab over here and go download Angular. Now, AngularJS is basically Angular 1, and then Angular.io. This is like, they call it like 2+ because it started with 2 and then was like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think now they're on 8.
Okay.
But like the difference between AngularJS, Angular 1, and then the other ones is significant.
Okay.
And then like Angular 2 to like Angular 6 is not a big jump. Like obviously some of the things are different.
So what would be a use case for using JS instead of IO?
Well, it's not necessarily IO because IO is just the like domain name.
Mm-hmm.
AngularJS, Angular 1, I'm sure there are use cases.
Okay.
But
I just wondered because there's the second search, so
I can't think of anything off the top of my head to say, yeah, you should definitely use Angular 1
Mm-hmm.
versus the new Angular, because there's a number of reasons why the new Angular exists, and that's this one. I haven't been in the Angular scene for a couple of years, so I'm going to be learning along as we go. So let's just follow through this stuff. So getting started, Angular CLI is something that they do, which is cool, overhanded, and not my favorite thing in the world, but whatever.
CLI?
Yeah, command line tool, or command line interface.
Okay.
So you actually use a set of tools on like that bash where we use like Git,
Mm-hmm.
to actually say generate.
So it's like a GUI interface?
No, it's a command line interface,
Okay.
CLI.
Okay.
So it's a bunch of tools baked into that to say, hey, Angular, build this file for me, or build this component, and it will go and generate all the docs that you need, or all the files, not necessarily docs. Documents as in like text documents, but they're code documents. So, new to web development, yep, there's some cool stuff. TypeScript. I forgot about that. Maybe we should go over TypeScript. 30-second overview. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. It adds types and some other things, obviously. And what happens is you basically say, here's all my rules. You take that JavaScript, the TypeScript, and actually compile it to JavaScript with those rules like built in place, which is wonky, but it works. I'm on the fence on whether or not I'm a fan of TypeScript. There are some things that are nice. Having static types is something that we'll get into with the low-level stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just so like you can understand. When you declare a variable, you're saying, hey, I want you to stick this thing in memory somewhere so that I can do stuff with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
With JavaScript, it's just like, oh yeah, here's the string let's go, and if you add plus equals 2, JavaScript will say, oh, you want me to take this string and add this number. I'm going to convert this number to a string and then stick it on the end. Yeah, I lost you. So
you basically
let me
just turn
pull
the
up
number
code.
into a word
Well, yeah.
and put it on the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
so one of the things that...
So instead of it being the number 2, it's just a plus 2 is part of...
Yeah, let me just do a file. Robotic Bartender? Sure, cool. Yeah, so like right now we have this this is a thing, this variable var.
Mm-hmm.
You could say var I equals 0 and var str equals woot. And then you could say str plus I, and that would, and if we console log this, that would
So you're saying the string
equal
woot plus
0. But, that's a number. It doesn't make sense to add a number. But if you say this was, say, 5, then it would actually do addition and say 5, right? And so that's the difference between statically typed languages and dynamically typed language.
Even though you put str equals... Oh, so
Yeah.
str is just your
It's
variable
just your
name.
variable,
It's not
right.
saying string.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, you can call it whatever you want. And so
Okay.
that's something that TypeScript will yell at you about. It'll say, no, these are 2 different types. And fundamentally, there's 4 types in JavaScript. You have a number, which can be any, a number of things, negatives, positives, floats,
Mm-hmm.
decimals. That's not the case in a lot of languages. That's a very easy way to handle it.
Yeah.
A string, which is
Text.
text. A object, which is like a kind of container of things, and an array, which arguably is an object, but an array is a list.
Is a special object.
Right, and so an array is
An array is a list, not a matrix. It's just a one column list, not a
you could have
not an
nested.
Excel file.
You could though. You could have a list of lists. So you could
Oh,
have
okay.
a 1D list, and then if each element of that was another list, you have a list of lists, which would be 2D.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are fundamentally your types in the world. 10 to 7. Okay, well, we got 20 minutes before that guy shows up.
Okay.
So in Angular, when we're doing stuff like this, we're going to have to be more cognizant of what's actually happening because it's not going to just magically do it for us, which JavaScript is very nice and I appreciate about it, but it can cause problems, which is basically the argument between static versus dynamically typed languages.
Yeah, it's nice to have things magically happen, but if something goes wrong, there's this black box that you got to figure out what the heck went wrong with.
Exactly. So, there's all sorts of stuff in here. Create a new project. Angular CLI.
Sorry.
Maybe we just go here. This is probably where we should go. Cool. One framework, mobile and desktop. Mobile and desktop. Huh. Interesting. Thanks. That's awesome. I didn't want to... Stacklets.
What's happening?
I think this is giving us a browser IDE, which with as little as we're going to do with Angular,
Browser might just be fine.
Yeah.
But you were trying to download something onto your desktop.
Yeah, so like I said, there's a whole bunch of tools.
Okay.
We can kind of like go around and talk about it. Yeah, I'll hurry and just like kind of run through what some of these things do. Because like before we had like our HTML, our CSS, and our JavaScript, right? That's like super basic. Well, you obviously need a lot more stuff to try to figure a lot of these things out, right?
Okay.
So package.json, this is something that NPM uses, which is the node package manager. Something that's really good and makes it really easy to add other people's functional code and do stuff with it, okay?
Yeah.
In here, you can see we have a bunch of dependencies being like Angular and RxJS and some of these things that you need to be able to run this application. And so what will happen is basically when you first go to the website, it will say, hey, I need all of these things as well as all the code that the programmer wrote to be able to run. And then that will make sure that it gets pushed across and works.
Have you used R?
Yeah.
Okay, so is this like adding in the different... Shoot, it's been too long since I've used R. Adding in the different...
You should talk about
Oh. Hi.
R packages.
Yeah, the R packages.
Yeah,
They're
same
just
idea.
packages.
Right, where you
Okay.
have some bundled set of code somewhere that someone else wrote that does
That will do
something
specific
useful,
things.
and you say, hey, that'll make my life easier, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You bring that in, drop it in your project. That's one of the reasons
Is
why.
that what JSON is?
So package.json is something that NPM uses to manage all that.
Okay.
So if you say...
So JSON is your package manager, basically?
JSON is a...
is a subordinate of the package manager?
No. JSON itself is a, it's a serialization of data. So, the way that this file is written is in JSON. And so that's, this is a, you know how I was talking about objects? This is an object. Okay. And then these things are strings, and these are, sub-objects. So that's just a way to display the data. Package.json is a special file that NPM uses to manage those packages because, for example, your R, if I bring in some package that calculates a very specific scientific formula for me, and I go down the road and say, a month goes by and I get an email from them saying, hey, there was an error in our code, make sure you go get the latest one with the fix in it. In NPM, one of the things, it actually will probably happen automatically, assuming they do it correctly. You don't have to go pull the old one out, put the new one in, it just manages it for you.
But it still tells you, so you know...
yeah, depending,
Because that could be a problem if you're writing a publication and you don't know how to change your figures.
Right, which will be, one of the things that NPM does is this is the version number, 2.6.10. If you do, I think it's tilde, like that, that will give you 2.6.10, and then if they add an 11, it'll automatically say, oh yeah, an 11, go grab that. But if they do they increment them, so the communication is hard, words are hard. It's described as a major version, which a major version is breaking backwards functionality. So if you had, a screwdriver and it's screws in the one direction, the upgrade would be the drill because now you can't really use the drill to pry things open. Like, it's a significant upgrade, and you can't expect it to just drop right into what the old thing did, right? It might do similar things, but you may have to have, to update your code to work with it. The middle one, what?
Do we need to delete that tilde?
I'll undo it. Oh. The middle one's a minor version saying that we've added functionality, but we haven't broken any backwards compatibility. So, screwdriver again, it's a screwdriver, but now it has an LED on it, right? And then the patch version is everything, and this is like best practice. Obviously, people don't always do this, but this is usually what the community does. Patch version is we're updating security or optimizations, or the thing still does exactly the same thing that it does,
but we're using different quality materials.
Yeah, like it's still the same thing, it just may be better under the hood now. So the tilde says increment this all you want, and then you can do a caret, which means increment both of these two all that you want. Okay. And then just a normal is this is the version you're using and you're never upgrading. Okay. So that's what the package does, keep track of all that stuff.
But is it gonna give you an alert when it updates things?
If you when you deal with it, yes. So what it doesn't happen automatically. You do an npm install, you run the command, and it will do that, and it will tell you, oh, we updated these packages or whatever.
Even if you have a tilde or a caret on there?
Yes, but it will tell you.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So, but it won't it's not something in the code is gonna say, oh, by the way, you updated this packet. That's your code. So, Angular JSON, similar thing where we're using JSON to just tell Angular a lot of the scripts that we're gonna run, the different polyfills which we're gonna use, which is kind of a niche thing. And this just tells Angular, where a lot of the things are, because you don't have to structure your code exactly the same. And you just have to tell it, hey, this is where my code is, here's where my, special things are and everything. So that's what that does. So then you actually get into your source. Index.html is exactly like the one that we did. The thing that's different is this is our app root. And so the way that Angular and React and a lot of these things work is what'll happen is you'll load that index page really, really fast, and then they'll trigger the JavaScript. And the JavaScript will go through and say, hey, find this thing, and I want you to replace this thing with the application I want someone to see. And so you get a really quick response time, JavaScript starts running and starts manipulating the page, right? Because that's all the JavaScript does is manipulates the HTML and CSS. So that's what that does. Main.ts is TypeScript, and this does exactly what I just talked about, where we bring in some of our environments and stuff, modules, and if we want to, if we want to run production, a little thing there. But then platform browser dynamic .bootstrap module, that's saying take this app module, which is the code that's been written, bootstrap it, basically go find that element and throw it onto the page, or basically give a reference to that element so that the app module can go through and populate the page out. Okay. Polyfills, this is something, so basically polyfills exist because browsers are not the same, and programmers want to program for just the web and not every single browser, same way that we don't want to program for two different iOS and Android. Polyfills will say, hey, if you want to have some specific animations or some weird things that say Internet Explorer doesn't support yet, here's a polyfill that will provide that support for you. The cost being you have to add code to your thing, which means it's slower to load and all that stuff. So obviously you don't want to do that if you don't have to, but basically everyone has to.
Okay.
At least to some extent. Styles.css, this is literally what we just did. The thing that's a little bit special about this, because Angular, is that this is a global thing. One of the things that I know we were kind of looking at in here was I was saying like, oh yeah, now make this thing like the different class name and these things, and then they would override each other and kind of be a problem. That's one of the problems that Angular and some of these other frameworks try to solve, is by packaging these things up behind the scenes. And so what will happen is basically we had this, let's see, like class. We say that this class is title. So if anything anywhere in the app starts using title, it's going to get hit by this thing, right? But if we want to separate it out, and let's say we had a login page, and so for the title for the login page, we just wanted to do our own thing, and the title for another thing, like instead of having to think about that, what happens in the background is this will be like, say, title dash QM and some key that is auto-generated by Angular, and then it'll throw it into the HTML and the CSS, so it doesn't have any of that overlap.
Okay.
But as a programmer, you don't have to think about that, you just do. Okay. Right? So that's that thing. So that's how that works. Environments, this is like configuration stuff, just to say if you're running production or not. That means Angular is going to behave differently, making it easier for you to debug and whatnot.
Okay.
Assets, so this is basically data store for the app to use, and then the actual app. So the way that Angular says to do things, you have like a app component, which is this set of stuff. It's all of these things.
Okay.
So this app component will say, okay, I am a component from Angular, and I'm an Angular component.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use this name in my HTML. This is the HTML that I want to put in that, and here's the CSS I want in with that. So CSS looks same. This is what I was just talking about, where they'll, in this particular component, they'll add like a key so that any of the CSS you want in this component doesn't run over CSS of other components.
Okay.
And then for app component HTML, we're going to have this top bar, we're going to have this router outlet, and like it's super, super basic. Okay. And like, if you haven't noticed, this top bar is actually this component over here. Modules is how Angular just does some of the stuff. I won't really get into that because I don't think we need to worry about that right now. And here's some data. I want to see, okay, so here's where things get a little different from what you were kind of dealing with. So obviously, if JavaScript did all the things exactly how you'd want them done, you just use JavaScript. So there's a lot of functionality that you don't have that makes it a lot easier, and that's some of the things that this does. Okay. So one of the things that'll happen is we had an A tag, remember, where you put a href on it and it goes somewhere. Well, that's not always enough, because what you actually want is to navigate inside of your application, which you can do with the normal href, but that means you're actually like exiting the app and going back into the app at that specified location. Whereas this is saying, hey, I want to go to this place in the app, and the app can say, oh, okay, pull those things out, put those things back in, and then you're not actually leaving. That's what this router link is saying, hey, go to the home / Okay. And then here's another one saying, oh, go to the cart / And they're like, this is all basic stuff. I was hoping to find some like ng ifs in here. Guess not. So, products. Is this getting started? Cool. We got it in G4. Okay, so this is a product list component, and since we've only got 5 minutes, thinking I'll kind of just talk about this and what data binding is. So, I didn't get to do very much coding, I'm sorry.
We learned all the things.
All the things.
All of them.
So this is a product list component. If you look here, it's like, hey, here's my store, here's my products, but there's nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they want us to implement this thing. So
Okay.
what I could hurry and show you is just copy and paste this in products here. Nope. App component. Router outlet. Product list. Oh, here we go. Boom. Now I believe if we save that, this should refresh. Does it not auto refresh? It might not auto refresh. Let's see. Guess not. Okay, well, we have products. Oh, we could just do products.name, I think. Yep, there we go. Okay, so what's happening here is we're using this special angularness of what this is, and that's denoted by this little star. It's used in a number of places in Angular, and we're saying ng, which is used in Angular a lot to denote Angular, for let product of products. So what this is actually like saying is it's basically doing it's doing a for loop in the HTML, which seems a little crazy. There's reasons for it. I'm not gonna deny that, but it's the way that Angular does things, which is fine. So basically, what we're saying is for var product of products stuff. That's basically what this is doing.
So what does that mean, product of products?
So
you have a variable product that is
Yeah.
within a variable product?
So the way that this works is it's an array. Remember I was talking about lists? So that is denoted by these little square boys.
Okay.
And what this will be is an object. It's a list of objects. And this will have a key. We'll say name is. So you'll have a number of these. And this is, our data. And this is something you could be pulling from a database to say, hey, what do I have available? Or in our case, this could be booze. We have a name, vodka, and a quantity, 100 ml. Or we'll just say 1,000, and we can, debate like what those units are supposed to be. But you know what I'm saying? Because there is some implicit things we can decide. So you could say, oh, so for this says make me a variable named product that is an item from the products. And what happens is it says, oh, okay, so here's the first one. Take this thing, hand it to here. And then, okay, do the stuff. When you're done, okay, take the next one, go through, hand it to here. And that's what's happening right now, is saying, I want to print the product.name. Oh, the guy is here.
Okay.
So I will jump off for now and jump back on next time. Bye. Hello?